everybody. Thank you for being with us today on the Todd Coconato Show. And we have a very important, amazing guest. He's taken time out of a very busy schedule to be with us. And he is actually the CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters, which I always enjoy. Every year, we're a part of NRB. I actually became a member of NRB. And we do a lot of, just so much that week. It's a very busy week. But Troy Miller, welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad that you're here today because there's a litany of things I want to discuss. But first of all, how are you doing? How is NRB? We're getting ready to have another NRB coming up very soon. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, that's right. Look, NRB is doing very well. I tell people there's no shortage of work right now for what we do. We're kind of the leading association that advocates for Christian communicators, especially up on Capitol Hill with all the legislation, regulatory environment, and in the mainstream media as well as corporate America. So still a lot of opposition out there, still a lot of stuff for us to work on. And you're right, our annual convention will be next February right here in Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Opryland. It'll be February 17th through the 20th. And a lot of people don't know, maybe a lot of your viewers don't know, this is open to the public. You don't have to be just an NRB member. If you're interested in any facet of Christian communications, this is the place to be. We'll have an exhibit floor, over 260 exhibitors last year. We'll have at least that many, if not more this year. And they'll cover all the areas that you could think about if you're in ministry or if you're just, again, an individual. Plus, hey, if you come, you're going to see people like Todd walking around and you might just get a chance to get up and shake his hand and thank him for all the great work he does on this program.
I always enjoy walking around the floor at NRB. We're going to be with Destiny Image this year, and my new book's going to be coming out. And so we have a big booth, and it'll be exciting. And yeah, you can see so many different people there. I mean, we run into everybody at NRB. So it's kind of one of the few, and as a pastor, this is a big deal to me, one of the few places where you'll see almost every denomination of Christianity kind of coming together under the guise of Christian broadcasting and media. And, ultimately having the goal of getting the gospel out there. And Troy, you're on the forefront of all this. What are you seeing when it comes to Christian media right now? I mean, because there's a lot of changes with podcasts and, just the whole environment. I mean, you're now seeing big corporations, even countries that are interested in podcasts because there's been such a shift from mainstream media to podcasts. What are you seeing as the CEO of that?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. We have there's a big shift in almost every aspect of media today, whether it's the back end production side of media, the distribution of media, the programming itself, and even the way media is kind of hosted and the content's created. All of that is kind of in flux right now. I tell people a lot, really think about it, Todd, we live in the greatest time in human history for communications, because we can communicate in an instant to almost anybody around the world, anywhere. All of us are carrying, one of these around with us in our pockets, and they do a lot more than just take telephone calls. Matter of fact, I saw a survey recently that people use their phones less than 10% to actually do phone calls, to do real phone calls. So that media is with you. Two of the big things I think that you talked about that are shifting, let me talk about those. One of them is distribution. In the television arena, and it's somewhat in the radio arena as well. Radio went through a kind of time where there was terrestrial radio and then satellite radio and then now digital radio itself. And radio, I think, is kind of leveled out. And it's still terrestrial radio is still a huge medium across this country with over 80 million people listening to radio on a regular basis. Television is going through that same transition now. Most people consume their television maybe 5-10 years ago through their cable system, either gotten through their telephone company or satellite or cable provider, and that's how they consume their video. And now today, those companies are all switching from video distributors really to broadband companies because people are quote unquote cutting the cord, which is really kind of a nuanced statement because they're not cutting the cord. They're just getting video different. They're getting it now digitally. So that consumption is going there. And then, as you said, on the content side, you're having this transition. So let me talk about a few things mainstream media wise.
Right.
And you look at some of the mainstream media folks. You had Tucker Carlson, right? He leaves Fox. Traditionally, when that would have happened, he would have jumped onto another, major network, major cable system somewhere. But no, he goes out and launches his own media platform. And now he has Tucker Carlson, and he's distributed, on social media platforms. He has his own YouTube channel, and he's basically become a brand within himself. Yes. And so you see that he's now moved from what we would traditionally think of as that program host to an influencer. Yes. So right. He hosts his own. And so there's a lot of that going on in the landscape of media as well.
So much. And we have to have discernment as Christians, because sometimes there's China, you have the Arab world, different people that are now pouring money into podcasters. And sometimes people kind of change their tune all of a sudden, and stop supporting, biblical principles. So we got to be careful. That's right. With some of that. NRB is outspoken. I love your recent op-ed, and I want you to talk a little bit about that. And, I love, I get all the emails. So when you put out a press statement or whatnot, but you don't see a lot of Christian organizations as vocal. And I applaud you and say thank you for being vocal in your support for the president and many different things. But why don't you share a little bit about your most recent op-ed?
Yeah, so we did a recent op-ed talking about, the optimism of really revival that we see going on in the community. And I'm going to talk about that from maybe two senses. One, revival, which I would say that's going on in the country from an unchurched people, and so we've seen just a lot of that. We've seen recently polls that we know that more young men are going back to church. We know that there are more Bible sales. We recently did a study with the Barna Group last fall, and one of the numbers that just blew us out of the water was that 60% of the general population of the U.S., 60%, that's not just Christian, that's general U.S. population, tunes into some form of Christian media. And that's huge. That's almost 2/3 of the country that tunes in. And the two biggest demographic groups inside of that were the Gen Zers. Gen Zers at 64%, and then the millennials, Gen Y, they were at 58%. And it was kind of interesting because a lot of people think that Christian media is maybe consumed more by older generations and that, but it's not. There's a real hunger in this country. We're seeing it. And of course, Todd, you've witnessed it with revivals that have gone on at Asbury and Liberty University and different campuses around this country, especially in that generation. I said it this way, there's a real rejection going on right now amongst the young people of the secular messaging that's been going on, that's been pushed on them for the last decade.
Boy, you're really hitting a sweet spot for me because I don't know if you know my testimony. I came out of Hollywood. I was a child actor. And so the Lord got a hold of my life in my early 20s, major change. I had a Damascus Road encounter when I got stabbed 9 times. It's a long story, but God spared my life. And, I was told success was to be famous, rich, all the things that the world pushes. What I found in Hollywood is some of the people are the most broken, empty. They can have money, fame. And, I know many of these people personally, and without Jesus, there's nothing. I mean, they don't have, it's a temporal thing. And so what is so interesting to me, my generation, which was generation before, we were the MTV generation. We were told this is what, makes you happy. In my lifetime, it's very exciting, but to see this young generation, like the Jesus movement, but even a new generation, and I think different in many ways, what do you think that it is that led to this other than praying people? But, what do you think it is that's happening?
Well, I do think a lot of it was praying people, but I also think a lot of it was the craziness that's gone on, as I said, in the secular messaging. God has given us we talk about a lot in Christianity, our general grace, right? But God's also given us general wisdom. We often call it common sense. And when you start doing things like saying that, men can get pregnant and have children and compete in women's sports and all this sort of crazy craziness that's gone on, particularly over the last maybe decade to decade and a half, I think that the younger generation is they're the ones that are really rejecting that. They're standing back and going, and as you said, like in Hollywood, what has that given me now? What has that really done for me? It's left me empty. Most often, it's left me depressed. It's left me with no purpose in life. And so the other interesting thing about the survey was that the reasons why the general public was tuning into Christian media. And the two biggest reasons were, one, I want to know God better. I want encouragement and to know God better and who God is. But here's underneath that was, I want to know how to have better relationships. The world, the hookup world, the secular world, it was leaving him empty in these relationships. And there's that hole in our hearts that only the gospel can fill. And also, we know that in Christians, true relationship amongst brothers and sisters in Christ, the body of Christ, those are fulfilling relationships. Those are relationships that matter and last forever. That's what this generation's looking for, and that's what these surveys have been telling us.
That's right. I'm so glad that there's this awakening that's happening. We're seeing it on college campuses. We're seeing it, beaches where people are getting baptized in the droves. Yeah. We're seeing it at our church. It's amazing what the Lord is doing. And that leads me to something else. I mean, there's something happening in the halls of Congress. There's something happening at the White House where people of God are coming and praying and having worship services. And I don't think people understand the enormity of this, because when there's an awakening in a nation, it doesn't just stay in the church. It goes to the colleges. It goes to the Congress. It goes to the government. Troy, you've been a part of some of this. In fact, I remember a moment in my life. I think it was Carol Swain. We were sitting at NRB, and the president came in. I think this was before he was elected again, but it was a year or two ago. But he spoke at NRB. And
that's right.
That's pretty amazing. So you're the CEO of an organization where the president of the United States came, spoke, addressed the folks. Why don't you tell us, what do you think about this administration? I know you've been down in D.C. a few times. What do you think about what's going on?
I spent a lot of time in D.C., Todd, a lot of time in there. Look, you're right. He spoke in 2024, when he was going for his second term as a candidate. First of all, the fact that one of the places he chose to come to and to launch, we were in February of 2024, the beginning of that kind of campaign season, that he came to kind of do that was to one of the largest gatherings of Christians and Christian communicators. And that said a lot about what he thinks about the Christian community. And of course, he's behind the scenes, behind the curtains, meeting him in the back. He is just as genuine as you can be. We all know he's got that camera persona to him, but he's just a real genuine guy. I can tell you, post that, especially that run and with the suicide or with the assassination attempt at Butler. He is convinced from the people that I know that are the closest to him that God spared him. He has no doubt that God spared him. That's God's life. And he has really taken that in a seriousness of the fact that what the mission that he is on, he really feels like God spared him for a reason. And we know that this country, while we talk about GDP and everything else, this country has been the greatest, I'll say it this way, exporter of the gospel of almost any country in history. And if America should fall, there's nobody to step up right now. Europe is lost. The other continents, the other major countries are a mess. America, so he steps up for that. But Todd, let me just expand real quick. You're right. This is probably beyond the president and his leadership, his direction, his focus for the Christian community. He has put together, I think we'd have to say, one of the most Christian teams of leaders that may have ever been assembled in the history of this country. I think you might have to go all the way back to the founding fathers to find a government that had more Christians serving in leadership positions, from his cabinet on. Pete Hegseth at Defense, Marco Rubio at State, Caroline Leavitt, all of them, Justice Department, all the way down to Assistant General attorney generals, just so many Christians. And when I get a chance to go over there, I'll be there on Monday, when I get a chance to go over there, all the time, all these different departments, all these different areas, whether it's state, whether it's defense, whether it's health and human services, all of these leaders lead their own Bible studies with their staffs and their own prayers. And it's just, but what a refreshing sense it is to know. And we know government doesn't have all the answers for us, but boy, do we want Christians in leadership positions? Absolutely.
Absolutely. I don't know which department it was. It might have been Homeland Security, but the other day I saw a tweet and it said, "Pray without ceasing." I said, wow, when do you see that?
Oh,
yeah. Did you see that?
I think that was Kristi Noem's tweet. Yeah, I think that was Kristi Noem. Jen Psaki, I think, who was a previous press secretary for Biden administration, she criticized people for praying for the families of the victims of the Catholic school shooting. Right. She criticized people for prayer. This is and that's an indication of what the previous administration was like. That's exactly, to downgrade somebody's faith and to downgrade prayer as unimportant and unhelpful. And again, like you said, you had Kristi Noem come out. You had all kinds of folks come out. Even the president himself talked about prayer, how important prayer is.
That's right. I mean, I think it was Gavin Newsom that was like, they were literally praying, who does that? It reminds me of when Hillary Clinton came out with the deplorables comment. I mean, you're alienating a good portion of the country. And we know that God does respond to the prayers of the righteous. I mean, we've seen so many prayers answered. There was a lot of people that said our country was done. And I really believe it was the prayers of the church coming together. Amen. If we could just figure that one out, coming together in unity on the 98% that we agree on, rather than maybe the 2% we don't, but really looking ahead. And so we have a few more years of President Trump. We're coming up into a midterm season again. How important? What do you see like some of the main issues that you would like to see coming down the pike right now?
Well, look, you're right. We're coming up to the midterms. We'll be into that, shortly. And there's, I think, one of the biggest issues that we really need people to understand is, while the president himself has done so much work and so much hard work, a lot of it has been done through these executive orders. Yeah. And we really need Congress to step up to the plate and make these changes permanent laws across this country. That is going to be one of the most important things, I think, for this next term, is whether the country really understands what's been going on and wants to solidify what the president has done. And I think, back to our talk about the change in the country, it's great that we're seeing all these events go on. But I think the biggest change that I see, and I'm kind of a Christian historian buff. That's my kind of hobby. If you look at the great revivals in the American past, if you look at the Great Awakenings, the first and the second, they had events and they had people going to church and all that. But the biggest thing that changed in the country was the attitude of people. They didn't have to make laws. If, for example, when Charles Finney was preaching in New York and stuff, they didn't have to make laws to close down the brothels or to close down bars or to close down gambling houses. People just stopped going. People just didn't go. It was one of the biggest sort of signs that the revival in the country was not only did people have the experience with God, but it changed the life and the way they were living their lives. I think we're seeing a lot of that in the country right now. I think we're seeing a real trend change in the way people are living their lives and looking at their lives and thinking about their lives and thinking about not only their kind of that selfish look, but thinking about their next generations, their children and their grandchildren. And we hear so much of those discussions. And that's, I think, gives us a great amount of hope for the future.
That's right. I mean, you see a tale of two stories. So recently they had Dylan Mulvaney that came out. Budweiser was a Bud Light. Totally tanked the brand. They saw tremendous losses. A lot of people are saying the saying, if you go woke, you go broke. You had Cracker Barrel that just went through. I mean, we're right here in the South, and I feel like they alienated the people that actually go and eat there, and so there was a big backlash. Then you have, American Eagle that have that Sydney Sweeney ad where just, good old Americana. And I'm not saying it's like Christian by any means, but stark difference between Dylan Mulvaney and Sydney Sweeney, and the folks are responding. And I think to your point, you're seeing cultural shifts where there's just a lot of backlash now against some of this woke ideology, which I, as a pastor, have said I feel a lot of it's demonic. I mean, it's, if you look at it from a scriptural standpoint, and unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of people that have really addressed it, but I think that that's changing now. You see a new generation of bold preachers rising up. You see a new generation of people that I believe are raised up for such a time as this, including yourself, to run such a very powerful organization like NRB. But what say you about that, sir?
No, I agree with you 100%. You do see it, and I was happy to see, even with this, you're not about the shooting, but with this last shooting, to see a number of people, especially pastors, have come up and talked about this is spiritual warfare. This is demonic. This is not just about some transgender kid that went kind of crazy. This is demonic, because there's a amongst the people that are in this, there's just a heavy darkness and blindness, and completely oblivious to even the sanctity of life, that you can go in and just shoot up a bunch of kids, young kids, school kids. I mean, how lost you have to be that can be okay for you to even contemplate. I mean, most of us couldn't even contemplate that, doing something like that. So it is, and it's also a call for us as the church. You talked about this a few times, and I can tell you it's one of the things that we have been working on, and we're continuing to work on. But the unity of the church, yes, and the church coming together, and the church understanding that it's not us against each other. The enemy is always trying to pit us against each other. Jesus told us a house divided will fall, right? It won't stand. A house divided will not stand, cannot stand. And so we know that the enemy we're also told that he comes to divide. Okay. And that's one of the things that he's been working on. But I really feel like there's a coming together of the church. Even at our last NRB convention, you're right. We have a big tent. We have Reformed guys, and we have mainline denominations, and we have Pentecostals, and we have charismatics, all kinds of folks. But the thing that made me the I guess I could say proudest, the most joyful, was when I saw a group that I knew there were 5 or 6 different beliefs in there, and they were standing in the hallway praying for one another. They were praying for world missions. They were praying for things that are going on. And so I think as the church, we do have to come together and realize this is a spiritual battle going on. This is a battle for the soul of people and the soul of America. This is not just about political power. This is not just about fleshly control. This is not normal politics. This is a spiritual battle for the soul of this country and really the soul of the world.
That's right. What you're saying is so true. And I don't think there's many people with the perspective that you have, because you got to kind of keep all those groups under the same roof. That's pretty amazing. I don't know too many places that would say that. And successfully. And that's what's amazing. It reminds me right before President Trump, I think before the election, actually, leaders came together in Atlanta, and it was like that, where there was a bunch of different pastors from different denominations. And that was really I thought, after I saw the Lord spare his life, after that assassination attempt, I really felt in my heart that he was going to win. But even seeing that unity of the believers, and, I've been a pastor for many years. It was really one of the first times that I'd seen that at such a level, where so many different pastors came together under the guise of praying for this nation and praying for its future. With that being said, are you hopeful? Are you hopeful right now? Because, you go on to social media, there's a lot of doom and gloom. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of people saying a lot of things are going to happen. What are you feeling right now in your spirit, Troy, as far as where we're headed?
Yeah, look, I am very hopeful. I am very hopeful in this. In the darkness, light always shines the brightest. And we have been through some very dark years and dark times in this country. The fact that the things that we're seeing going on tells us that God has not pulled his hand of grace away from us. As a matter of fact, I feel like he's pouring out his grace even more. Especially look as we, lose some of our foundational saintly for pastors. John MacArthur passed away. Dobson's passed away. And just we lost. just several people over the last decade here, but I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that the country is really coming around. And I think it's really centered around that hole that's missing in us. But at the same time, Todd, I'm not naive, okay? Because oftentimes as Christians, we look at good times and look, this is the history. If you study the Old Testament, every time Israel got into a good place economically,
Yes.
socially, culturally, they failed because they forgot God. Every time they chased off idols and forgot God. And so we, as a church in particular, we need to not get into that comfort zone and then forget what our calling is, to share the gospel and to disciple people. So both of those things, we have to keep both of those things in balance as we move forward as a church.
That's right. How do you handle the critics? Because I'm sure you have people that attack you and say things, especially in the age where anybody in their basement can basically say something. How do you handle that? What have you learned from just dealing with that?
Well, two things. My Apostle Paul is probably my hero. Christ is my Lord and Savior, and Paul may be my hero in the New Testament. And boy, he had his critics, right? And he looked at him as a bit of a badge of honor, and also said, "I'm doing the right thing. If the world's not attacking me, then there must be a problem. I must be too comfortable, too close to the world in there." So there's that. But also, we have to remember too, at the end of the day, this is again not about power. It's not about us being in charge or in control. We're never going to force Christianity on anyone. That doesn't work. If the law, God's law, God tells us that his law couldn't get us to behave correctly, right? It just revealed our sin. Then man's laws aren't going to get us to behave correctly. It's only the change in our heart through the work and the blood of Jesus Christ that's going to get us to change correctly. So that kind of balance there, I think, is what we have to in the church. I'm optimistic because I think God is pouring out his spirit now. Maybe we're in the last days and I will pour out my spirit, and God's pouring out his spirit across the church. I see unity not only in the church, Todd, but I think, as you know, I work a lot with Israel and our Jewish friends, and we're a major supporter of Israel and Zionism. I also see a lot of barriers coming down there. There are Christian Messianic Jews that are now working with Orthodox Jews and Christians in Orthodox, and it's it's kind of like wow, cats and dogs are hanging out and stuff, and it's so exciting to see because I think God's on the move, and wow, as a Christian, living in a time when God's on the move, that's exciting.
That's right. And I love that NRB is vocal about standing with Israel, because there is a lot of people online on X that are going the opposite direction. And I really think this is a sign of the times. And, this nation's been blessed because we've stood with Israel. I think we need to continue to do that. You're on the forefront of that. And like you said, we're seeing something very powerful that God is doing in the midst of all this. So before we go, Troy, any last words? There's AI. There's all kinds of people online that are a little bit wacky, that are online saying all kinds of crazy things. You are the head of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Christian media organization conference. What would you recommend to folks, as they're scrolling, and what type of thing you want to say to them about media?
Well, look, every tool that's ever been created from the history of mankind was usually always created with a good intention in mind, and we always apply something bad to it. We created a bow and arrow. Maybe it was Nimrod. He was one of the greatest hunters early in the Bible. He created it for hunting. The next thing you know, we're shooting our neighbor. So look, man's heart. We have a different Christian worldview than folks, and we've got to hold solid to that worldview. I would say to people right now, if there's anything you can do that can protect yourself from all the deceptions that are online, all of the misuse that's going on out there, all the manipulation that's going on, is to hold yourself fast to your Christian worldview. Yes. Hold fast to what you believe and what you understand in the scriptures and what you've learned in your church, in that, and make sure you're looking at the world through that lens. That should be the lens that you look at the world on, and then God's going to protect you. Your spirit will know immediately, this just doesn't feel right, right? God tells us, the Bible tells us that he gives us that gift of discernment, and pray for that gift of discernment. But you're a Christian communicator. If you're out there and you're on social media, and you don't have to be like Todd or myself in this, you're a Christian communicator. Right now, the average person has 400 people in their network that they influence. 400 people. That's almost 4 times larger than the average church in this country out there. You're a Christian communicator. People want to hear from you. The generations want to hear from you. Don't take the lie that your Christianity is personal and you need to keep it to yourself. People want to hear about your testimony. Remember, it's the power of our testimony. Nobody can take that away from you, the power of your testimony and your relationship with God. So be a Christian communicator.
So good. Yeah, I really appreciate everything you had to say today. And, I'm just thankful that you're doing what you're doing. We're going to be praying for you, Troy. I love that NRB's in Nashville this year. I was happy that when it was in Grapevine, I was happy it was in Florida, but I'm always excited when it's back in Nashville. But how can people follow you, the work that you're doing, and all the things that you're up to? NRB.org is our main website. You can find all the access you need there to all the issues that we're covering, the things we're working on, AM radio, AI, everything. You'll find all that there. You'll also find a link of how to register. Registration is now open for NRB 2026, how to register for that. And you can also find all of our social media accounts there as well to follow us on the various social media platforms. NRB.org. We're going to put that information up and also in the link. And now we're going to have In-N-Out here in Nashville. So that's right. I'm excited about that. I'm counting down the days. So Troy Miller, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate you, sir. Thank you for having me.